Good morning. This is Commission President Hamdi Mohammed convening the regular meeting of September 10th, 2024. The time is now 10:30 a.m. We're meeting in person today at the Port of Seattle Headquarter Building Commission Chamber. Present with me today are Commissioners Calkins, Cho, Fellman, and Commissioner Hasagawa, who are currently gathered in the executive session room awaiting the opening of public meeting. We are now recessing into the executive session to discuss one item regarding national security and computer network security per RCW 4230-110 sections 1AI and section II and potential litigation and legal risk per RCW 4230 sections RCW 4230-110 section 1I for approximately 60 minutes. We'll reconvene in public session at 12 p.m. Thank you all.
We are in recess.
Commissioners, I called the public meeting to order and have that's not it. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Commission President Hamdi Mohammed reconvening the regular meeting of September 10th, 2024. The time is now 12 p.m. We are meeting in person today at the Port of Seattle Headquarters Building Commission Chambers. Due to the ongoing network outage at the port, the meeting today is being held entirely in person without a virtual component. In addition, while this meeting is being recorded, it cannot be live streamed or uploaded to the meeting portal at this time. The meeting has been fully noticed as required by law, and the agenda and the meeting materials for this meeting are available through the alternative WPPA website established. Clerk Hart, please call the roll for all commissioners in attendance.
Thank you. Beginning with Commissioner Calkins.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Cho.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Fellman.
Present. Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Hasagawa.
Present.
Thank you. And Commissioner Mohammed.
Present.
Thank you. We do have a full commission here today.
Thank you, Clerk Hart. A few housekeeping items before we begin. For everyone in the meeting room, please turn your cell phones to silent. For anyone at the dais, please turn off the speakers on any computers and silence your devices. Please also remember to address your request to be recognized to speak through the chair, and wait to speak until you have been recognized. You'll turn on your mics on and off as needed. Thank you. All votes taken today will be through the roll call method or general consent. So it is clear for anyone participating how votes are casted. Commissioners will say aye or nay when their names are called. We are meeting on the ancestral lands and waters of the Coast Salish people, with whom we share a commitment to steward these natural resources for future generations. Please now stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all so much. The first item of business today is the approval of the agenda. As a reminder, if a commissioner wishes to make a general comment for or against an item on the consent agenda, it is not necessary to pull the item from consent agenda. Rather, a commissioner may offer general supporting or opposing comments later in this meeting once we get to that part of the agenda. However, it is appropriate at this time if a commissioner wants to ask questions of staff, wishes to have a dialogue on consent agenda items, to request the item be pulled for a separate discussion. Commissioners, are there any items to be pulled from the consent agenda or any motion to rearrange the order of the day? Commissioner Fellman.
Commissioner President, I would like to pull item 8G.
Great. Item AG, you
Commissioner
said?
President. 8G.
8G. Okay. Commissioners, the question is now on approval of the agenda with item 8G addressed separately. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Seconded.
Great. So the motion has been made and seconded. Is there any objections to approval of the agenda as amended? Hearing none, the agenda is approved as amended. Thank you all. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the Executive Director's report. Executive Director Metrick, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, President Mohammed. Good afternoon, Commissioners. It's been a month since we last met in public session, and I hope you're all able to enjoy some time away from the port during that time period. For our part, the last month has been eventful, punctuated, of course, by the cyber event here at the port. Before I provide an update on our response to that cyber attack, I would want to highlight work at the port that was happening before, during, and continues after the cyber incident, especially due to the hard work of our port staff across all of the port. I want to start with the Maritime Division. We are now 80% through our 25th cruise season here at the port, and it's been an absolute success. In fact, we hit a major milestone last week when our partner, Seattle City Light, officially energized the shore power at Pier 66, and we'll be testing the system with calling vessels at the end of this month. And we'll keep you updated on the progress and report when we have successfully had a shore-to-ship connection going forward. But of course, as you know, we want to make sure it's working before we celebrate the completion of that project. On the aviation side, the airport continues to serve historic numbers of passengers, seeing more than 75,000 people go through screening in a day several times this summer. To provide some context to those levels, when I began my role in 2018, a 60,000 passenger day was a very big deal, and now it's pretty routine for us to have that. We also learned that the airport received a $450,000 grant from the Federal Aviation Administration to test new technologies for PFAS treatment in groundwater and in surface water. We'll be testing to see if these new technologies will be applicable for source area treatment and reduction. So that's good news. We continue to prioritize our engagement with the community as well. On September 6th, we hosted a community boat tour of the Duwamish River. That was a big success. We sponsored 4 events last Saturday: the Chinatown International District Community Celebration, the KEXP Afro-Punk Festival, the Gateway Park North Community Event, and the South King County Grantee event at Burion's Shark Garden. And there are a dozen more events in communities taking place in September and October. Of course, the most impactful event of the last month has been the cyber incident. As you know, early on Saturday, August 24th, the port identified unauthorized activity on our systems. The port immediately shut down network connections to isolate critical systems. Since that time, there's been no new unauthorized activity, and we are continuing to actively monitor our information environment. I need to stress that this is an ongoing active investigation, and therefore I cannot share detailed updates on the information technology side that we have in place to protect the integrity of the investigation that's ongoing. I can provide an update on our operational response and assure you that the port will share more information about this incident and the lessons learned about that when we conclude the investigation. Anytime we are in a crisis situation, you need to establish the principles that will guide your response. And for us, it's a continuity of operations is our top priority. Keeping our gateways secure, open, and safely operating so people have jobs to go to and the economy keeps moving is always job number 1 here at the port. This also means paying employees and businesses for the work that they are doing, communicating with our passengers and the public in a way that continues to earn their trust, and strengthening the integrity of our systems for the future. In the first 48 hours of this incident, we were able to assess where we had the greatest needs to achieve safe continuity of operations. We immediately connected with major customers, federal agencies, and our local government partners. As many of you know, this incident occurred just a week before the busy Labor Day travel period, an extremely busy cruise season as well. Maintaining safe and secure operations while we lost access to many systems was a challenge. One way we solved that problem was leveraging our greatest asset, our people here at the port. I'm very proud of the dedication, expertise, and resiliency of our employees who demonstrated an incredible knowledge of systems, backup systems, the manual systems that backed up our systems, and in some cases invented new systems on the spot to deal with those circumstances. I have also been very proud of the perseverance and the commitment of our employees. Those who could not access their normal work equipment like email or digital files were invited to come down to the airport to support passengers. and there was a large response to that request. Over a 10-day period, employee volunteers across the port worked more than 4,000 hours in green vests, customer service roles, bringing the value of helpful at SEA to life. This basically allowed us to overcome the loss of our passenger information systems throughout the port. They assisted travelers and those coming to the airport with flight check-in. Some carriers were handwriting boarding passes and bag tags, and they helped parting passengers find gates or arriving passengers find their baggage carousels, or they just provided directions around the airport. And I know they got a lot of good response and they felt a lot of feeling of accomplishment of able to help people. Those interactions, big and small, help support our teams and travelers get through the busy weekend safely with a minimal of impact. As you know, we are now focused on restoring our systems. I want to assure you that we are not just restoring what we had, but building an informational technology backbone that will make the entire port more resilient in the future. We already have many examples where this crisis has been a catalyst to implementing changes and enhancements that were either already in the queue or that had been on the wish list to have, and those have been accelerated. It is not lost on me that we are restoring and building systems that would normally take years to do in a matter of days and weeks. We're just 17 days in this incident right now, but we are already learning many lessons as we go. One takeaway that I would offer is that a cyber incident is incredibly common. As a matter of fact, the Highland School District, as we learned, is currently in the news now. And for everyone, businesses and governments alike, you need to invest in cybersecurity, which we have here at the port. You know, cybersecurity is great, but you also need to be prepared should a cyber attack gain access to your systems. A message I'm sharing with my peers is to have a plan for workarounds for your most important processes that are IT-based. If you do not have access to your key systems, have plans for maintaining your operations, and importantly, paying businesses and the people for the work that they do. As I said, we will share more information about the incident and lessons learned after the investigation concludes. Moving to today's meeting, I'd like to highlight a few items. Notably absent from today's agenda is our routine monthly claims and obligations report. This item is typically listed second on the consent agenda following the approval of the minutes, but is not reflected on the agenda today due to the workplace disruption on our systems. We will hopefully be able to provide it for the August and September report on the October consent agenda. I want to acknowledge our incredible accounting and financial reporting team who are working around the clock to ensure our obligations are met with the limitations that we have on our systems. Item 8D on our agenda is an action related to portable restrooms. This action gives the port flexibility to provide portable restroom services at SCA landside locations, including the public cell phone waiting lot on the third floor of the terminal parking garage near the taxer feeder lines and in the cruise bus lot. Built into this action are funds set aside for future ad hoc portable restroom needs. Notably, portable restrooms will no longer be part of 160th T&C lot, as the port staff will put into operation 4 permanent restrooms to service T&C partners as they wait for a ride. I'm happy to report that the new units will go into service this week. Item 8F is a request to install smart meters at our waterfront. This project involves installation of both natural gas and electric smart meters, along with all necessary components required for the collection of metering data at various maritime facilities. This will result in more efficient monitoring to identify issues, usage, accuracy of tenant, utility billing, and the compliance with Washington Clean Building Performance Standard. The last item on consent agenda is a request related to low voltage electrical infrastructure at the airport parking garage. This renewal and replacement project supports lighting, metering, HVAC, and fire protection systems critical for safety. I should mention that this project does not address electrical vehicle charging. Capital Programs is currently developing a roadmap to address electric vehicle charging infrastructure and expect that roadmap to be completed by the end of this year. Commissioner, that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Metrick, for those comments and updates. I also want to acknowledge on behalf of the Commission the recent cyber attacks and express my deep gratitude, our deep gratitude to staff members for their leadership during this challenging time at the Port of Seattle. While the Commission has not made any public comments on this issue, I want you all to know that we have been in executive sessions being briefed on this issue and have been providing guidance. I'd like to also just express deep gratitude to our technology team, the whole entire ICT team, our security team, both here and at the airport, and just the entire port staff, those who work directly for the Port of Seattle and those who work indirectly for the Port of Seattle, for your leadership, for stepping up and rolling up your sleeves to help us address this issue. The cyber attack did cause significant internet and technology challenges and outage, and just I want to say again, it's been a collaborative effort for us to quickly take action and being able to restore our systems. It's so great that folks are able to travel through the airport easily now, and all of the airlines do have what they need to remain in operations. I also just wanted to acknowledge my colleagues, Commissioner Cho and Commissioner Calkins, who both were at the airport and providing support, working alongside staff when this issue has happened. And so thank you both for your leadership. And in response, I just wanted you all to know that the Commission is considering establishing a cybersecurity committee to provide further oversight and guidance around this issue to strengthen and ensure that our defense is strong moving forward. And so, again, I just want to express my gratitude for everyone who has played a role and has helped us get back into operations. And the future will be even better for us, and we'll have even a stronger defense come the next time if that ever happens again. Well, thank you all for that, and I will move us along now in the agenda. We are now at committee reports. We have Strategic Advisor Erica Chung, who will provide us with that committee report.
Good afternoon, President Mohammed, Commissioners, Executive Director Metric. I have one really short committee report for you today. On August 20th, Commissioners Hasegawa and Calkins convened the Equity and Workforce Development Committee meeting. There were 2 items for briefing: finding from the disparity study with the Diversity and Contracting team, and equity and business planning with the Office of Equity and Diversity Inclusion. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Are there any questions for Erica at this time? All right, thank you again. So we are now at the public comment section of our agenda. The Port of Seattle welcomes public comment as an important part of the public process. Comments are reviewed and considered by the Commission in its deliberation. Before we take public comment, let's review our rules for in-person public comment. Clerk Hart, please play the recording.
The Port of Seattle Commission welcomes you to our meeting today. As noted, public comment is an important part of the public process, and the Port of Seattle Commission thanks you for joining us. Before proceeding, we will overview the rules governing public comment for your general information. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak unless otherwise revised by the presiding officer for the purposes of meeting efficiency, and the speaker shall keep their remarks within the allotted time provided. A timer will appear on the screen, and a buzzer will sound at the end of the speaker's comment period. The Commission accepts comments on items appearing on its agenda and items related to the conduct of port business. The presiding officer will ask speakers to limit their comments to these topics. This rule applies to both introductory and concluding remarks. Disruptions of Commission public meetings are prohibited. General disruptions include, but are not limited to, the following: speaking before being recognized by the presiding officer, holding or placing banners and signs in the meeting room in a way that endangers others or obstructs the flow of people or view of others at the meeting, intentionally disrupting, disturbing, or otherwise impeding attendance or participation at a meeting, refusing to follow the direction of the presiding officer or security personnel, attempting to use the comment time for purposeful delay without conveying a discernible message, using the comment period to assist in a campaign for election of any person to any office or for the promotion of or opposition to any ballot proposition except when addressing action being taken by the Commission on a ballot proposition appearing on its agenda, directing public comments to the audience, engaging in abusive or harassing behavior, including but not limited to derogatory remarks based on age, race, color, national origin, ancestry, religion, disability, pregnancy, sex, gender, sexual orientation, transgender status, marital status, or any other category protected by law, the use of obscene or profane language and gestures, assaults or other threatening behavior, and sexual misconduct or sexual harassment. For safety purposes, individuals are asked not to physically approach commissioners or staff at the meeting table during the meeting. Individuals may provide written public comment before or after the meeting, and in addition, speakers may offer written materials to the commission clerk for distribution during their testimony to the commission. A detailed list of the public comment rules is available through the commission clerk. If a meeting is disrupted by an individual in attendance in the meeting room or by an individual providing public comment in person or virtually, the port will impose progressive consequences that may result in exclusion from future meetings. Written materials provided to the clerk will be included in today's meeting record. The clerk has a list of those prepared to speak. When your name is called, please come to the testimony table or unmute yourself if joining virtually. Repeat your name for the record and state your topic related to an item on the agenda or related to the conduct of port business. For those joining virtually, when you have concluded your remarks, please turn off your camera and mute your microphone. Our public comment period will now commence. Thank you again for joining us today.
Very good. All right, so our first speaker for today is Cassidy Fisher with Maritime Blue. Yes. Welcome.
Hi. Okay, are we good to go?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, commissioners and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Cassidy Fisher, and I'm the Joint Innovation Program Manager or Program Director at Washington Maritime Blue. I'm here to express our strong support for the proposed order requiring the Executive Director to consider greenhouse gas reduction goals before renewing long-term cruise agreements. As a first mover knowledge partner in the Pacific Northwest to Alaska Green Corridor for cruise, we recognize the critical role that the cruise industry plays in our region's economy. However, we also understand the urgent need to address the environmental impact of maritime activities. In furtherance of this, Maritime Blue has been working in partnership with the Port of Seattle, the Seaport Alliance, and the Consortium for Hydrogen and Renewably Generated E-Fuels in the shaping of a sustainable maritime fuels collaborative to bring together supply and demand stakeholders to accelerate the production and end use of sustainable maritime fuels and technologies in Washington. We see this order as in clear alignment with this work and an essential tool for further transparency between the different stakeholders within the maritime decarbonization value chain. In our conversations with ports around the globe, we often hear the challenges they face as landlord ports in addressing climate change and influencing their leaseholders' emissions actions. This order represents a concrete and impactful step that the port can take within its role and demonstrates how ports can work collaboratively with industry to achieve long-term environmental goals. We've seen positive steps from industry partners, and I'd like to specifically thank Carnival Cruise Line for their groundbreaking agreement that aligns with this order. Their recent membership with Washington Maritime Blue is another concrete step showing their commitment to action in advancing the blue economy. By implementing this order, the port can take a leadership role in encouraging investment in sustainable technologies, aligning with global environmental goals, maintaining Seattle's position as a leader in green maritime practices, and creating opportunities for local businesses in the clean energy sector. In conclusion, Washington Maritime Blue fully supports this forward-thinking order, and it represents a crucial step towards a more sustainable maritime industry. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next, we have Kurt with Climate Solution, and who's the Maritime Policy Manager. Welcome.
Good afternoon, commissioners, directors, staff. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today. My name is Kurt Ellison. I'm the Maritime Policy Manager for Climate Solutions, a regional nonprofit focused on clean energy and climate policy. I'm also speaking in support of item 10C, greenhouse gas reductions in long-term cruise agreements. We believe that this order is an important step in the port's goal to be carbon neutral by 2050. We see this proposal as a logical addition to the port's climate commitments, investment in decarbonization, and leadership in sustainable maritime. To ensure progress, we believe that policies need to be robust, transparent, and timely. This policy requires a review and public data sharing that is crucial to ensure investment in pollution reductions are meeting established targets. It is also important that mechanisms exist to handle noncompliance or underperformance by linking pollution reductions with continued Seattle-based operations. As a public port, we believe these policies are in the best interest of port communities and help ensure a sustainable maritime future for our state. Not only do these criteria make sure that the cruise industry is reducing their climate impact, but agreements that encourage steps such as vessels using zero-emission fuels will help create a market reducing risk for the broader regional maritime sector. This should encourage the uptake of clean marine fuels, furthering the work of federal investments in green hydrogen and state support for green marine fuels. In line with the current climate goals of the Port of Seattle and the state of Washington, I would urge the commissioners to vote in favor of the cruise ship order, and we look to the commission to bring forward similar proposals for the port's other business sectors. On a related item, I would strongly urge the commissioners to express the port's opposition to ballot initiative 2117, or item 10A. In the last state budget, over $300 million from the Climate Commitment Act was allocated for projects in the state's maritime sector. This state support has been crucial to the port's funding of sustainability projects in line with the port's mission to be the greenest and most energy-efficient port in North America. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your comments as well. Next, we have Jane Stevenson with Pacific Environment.
Hi, good afternoon, Port Commissioners and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to provide public comment today. My name is Jane Stevenson, and I'm with the nonprofit Pacific Environment. For those who don't know us, we have a consultative status at the International Maritime Organization. Today, I'd like to comment on order number 2024-10 regarding cruise ship greenhouse gas emissions. We commend the port for its efforts to date to advance maritime decarbonization, such as requiring cruise ships to use shore power by 2027. And this order is another step in the right direction, given that most of cruise ship emissions occur in transit, and absent the transition to low and zero carbon fuels, the cruise industry's growth in this region will continue to increase greenhouse gas emissions. We encourage the Commission to adopt the proposed order, but the port must also go beyond symbolic evaluation and publicity commitments. We urge the port to outline enforceable measures that it will take based on its evaluation in the order to require emission reductions in order to call on the Port of Seattle. Without these mandatory measures, Port of Seattle's growth of the cruise ship industry is unsustainable. Moreover, while it's true that zero carbon fuels will eliminate the need for scrubber systems, low sulfur marine fuels are already on the market that remove the need for these systems. We thank the port for continuing to ban scrubber discharge at berth and ask that you also support a statewide ban on scrubbers. We appreciate the port's focus on utilizing its existing authorities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions where possible and the impacts of the maritime industry on port communities, and we will continue to encourage other ports to follow your leadership. Thank you for considering these comments.
Thank you. Next, we have Sandy Olson with Carnival Corporation. Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm here to speak about cruising, so Sandy Olson from Carnival Corporation. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today. So reducing greenhouse gas emissions is Carnival Corporation's #1 sustainability priority as we aspire to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions from ship operations by 2050. In previous testimony, I have shared that our global fleet is producing 10+% less total greenhouse gas emissions today than our peak historical year in 2011. And I've also reported on our collaboration with Seattle to install shore power here almost 20 years ago. It made Seattle the second place in the world to have shore power for cruise ships. Today, I want to update you on our biofuels testing, another initiative that we have underway to drive down our carbon footprint. So over the past 3 years, Carnival Corporation has successfully used biofuel as a replacement for fossil fuels in several trials. In Europe in 2022, our German brand AIDA was the first to power a large-scale cruise ship using a blend of marine biofuel made from 100% sustainable raw materials and marine gas oil. And just last week, they piloted another blended biofuel entirely based on advanced waste and residue systems. Also in Europe, Seattle's hometown cruise line, Holland America Line, was the first to power a ship with 100% biofuel in 2022. And this year, they conducted a multi-month trial in Norway using 100% biofuel. On this side of the pond, Carnival Cruise Line successfully trialled biofuel as a 100% replacement for fossil fuel in Port Canaveral last year. But I'm pleased to say, Commissioners, that Seattle will also be part of the global exploration. Working in partnership with the port, we are planning a demonstration project to scope the supply of a non-fossil fuel here in Seattle to understand every aspect of the supply chain, from availability to bunkering to operation. We're at the early stages of developing the trial, but I look forward to sharing the results of that with you at a future Commission meeting. We're proud of the progress we're making, but we also understand that more work is needed, and we thank the Port of Seattle for their partnership as we strive towards a common aspiration. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next, we have Peggy with Seattle Cruise Control. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Peggy Prince, and I'm speaking about Order Number 2024-10. You're announcing today that you're going to consider cruise lines' greenhouse gas reduction goals before the port renews its long-term agreements with these businesses. I commend you on this move. By doing so, you're openly discussing the huge impact of cruise travel on the environment. In today's proposed order, you're acknowledging that as your cruise business grows, as you state, without adoption of zero and low carbon energy alternatives, its greenhouse gas and other emissions are increasing. Yes, increasing, as more and larger ships sail and more passengers fly here on planes. Of course, you must realize this resolution is largely symbolic, and there's a danger in empty actions like these. You're perpetuating the myth that you're making the port green. In fact, it's going to be the greenest port in North America, when actually, as you admit, the trajectory is going in the opposite direction. Trying to meet your ambitious targets, you point to shore power, which, as you know, only compensates for a small fraction of a ship's overall emissions. Ships only plug into electric power for about 7 hours of their 7-day voyages. You refer to green methane as a possible carbon-free fuel, yet it will be at least a decade, if ever, before ships can utilize such solutions. In the meantime, as my colleagues and I at Seattle Cruise Control keep reminding you, the only path to zero emissions and carbon neutrality is reducing cruise travel. Everything else is words, and even well-intentioned words are not the solution we need. Thank you for taking a small step in the right direction, and please consider actions that will truly make the port green. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Peggy, for your comments. Next, I have Patrick. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. My name's Pat McKee, and I'm here to address Order 2024-10 also. I'd urge the Commission not to approve Order 10 today. It feels unfinished, a press release dressed up as policy, and it's fundamentally unserious, sufficient neither to the inflection point moment we're in or to the expressed intent of the Commissioners themselves working to reconcile climate and economy. The order was forwarded with a respectful acknowledgement that it might not go far enough for us. That's not wrong, but it's not the point. Everybody understands compromise and half measures are what progress looks like sometimes, as long as we remain clear-eyed about their effectiveness. This order is opaque at its core, really a textbook example of greenwashing that doesn't further the mission of the port. In the introduction, the order states, while the growth of the cruise industry will provide economic benefits without certain carbon alternatives, it will also lead to an increase in greenhouse gas. But we're not talking about dystopian future scenarios. Cruise growth has already resulted in enormous GHG increases. A serious consideration of the attainment of GHG reduction goals might address this ruinous present-day reality instead of compounding catastrophe by increasing sailings for years to come. Cruise corporations have committed to achieving the IMO's 2023 strategy of net zero GHG goals by 2050, a strategy that doesn't align even with the Paris Accords. Why not acknowledge that cruise industry emission goals fail to put us on the path to 1.5 C necessary for climate sustainability? We're told clean and zero carbon fuels will eliminate the need for exhaust gas cleaning systems. But why wait? The port could publicly call on cruise companies to upgrade to low sulfur fuel tomorrow. Problem solved. No more scrubbers. The wording of the order reflects a similar reluctance to actually compel the port's cruise partners, rife with equivocal qualifiers like consider the attainment, strive, include language that supports evaluation, explore the feasibility. Don't bother looking for consequences or enforcement mechanisms. It's business as usual or promises of future change spun as bold progress. As currently written, Order 10 lacks transparency, it's largely aspirational, it's devoid of accountability. But the crisis we're facing is more serious than this, and the Port Commission is more serious than this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat, for your comments. Now our next speaker is Sandy Hunter. With Defenders of Highline Forest. Welcome, Sandy.
Thank you. Sandy Hunt, yes. Thank you, and congratulations on your recent Green Award, I believe, for the airport. You guys, I know the commission is really dedicated to moving us in the right direction in the face of climate catastrophe. Defenders are looking at a very little piece, and it's the land where my students, as me as the former president of the Teachers Union in Highland, reside, and the impacts of the port on their health and on their learning are well documented now through a UW study. So we are asking you to really be considering how we're going to save life-giving trees. That's one of, green spaces, places that will allow our students to continue to thrive in that area. There is a project that we are looking at that is port-owned, South Des Moines Creek West Business Park. 500 trees are going to be cut there. A stream is going to be rerouted. The development that was done to the west of that park, the storm water quality mitigation is already failing. We assume we're looking into this part of it. We've asked Washington State Department of Ecology to look into why that stormwater drainage that was put in and the previous project is failing. And, climate change could be part of it. I mean, the storms that we have are much more intense, and this project is not really being built on a piece of land that makes sense. By having to reroute a whole stream, by cutting down 500 trees, and by rerouting a trail that right now the trees protect the folks on the trail, and having people walk out to the road is just really not acceptable to the community. We have appealed the SEPA, and we'll be back here every other week telling you what's going on. So thank you.
Thank you, Sandy, for your comments. Well, that concludes our signups for today. Is there anyone else present in the room today who did not sign up but wishes to address the commission? If so, please come to the table and state your name at this time. All right, hearing none, at this time I'll ask Clerk Hart, please give us a synopsis of any written comments.
Thank you, President and members of the commission. We actually did not receive any written comments for this meeting today.
Okay, very good, thank you. So hearing no further public testimonies, we will now move on to the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered routine and will be adopted by one motion. Items removed from the consent agenda will be considered separately after adoption of the remaining consent agenda items. At this time, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agendas covering items number 8A, 8B, 8C, 8D, 8E, 8F. 8G is removed, 8H, 8I, and 8J.
So moved.
Great. The motion was made and seconded. Commissioners, are there any general comments regarding consent agenda items at this time? Hearing none, commissioners, please say aye or nay when your name is called for approval of the agenda. Clerk Hart.
For approval of consent agenda, beginning with Commissioner Calkins.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Cho.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Hasagawa. Aye. Thank you, Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you. 5 ayes, 0 nays for this item.
Great, the motion passes. We will now address the item that was removed from the consent agenda. Clerk Hart, please read the item into the record, and then Executive Director Metrick will introduce the item.
Thank you. This is Agenda Item 8G, authorization for the Executive Director to execute an interlocal agreement with the Washington State Department of Natural Resources to support a 5-year follow-on study to conduct eelgrass, kelp, and sediment carbon monitoring and data collection in the amount of $227,000 for the Smith Cove Blue Carbon Project.
Commissioners, you authorized this project as a pilot back in April 2020. Since that time, Phase 1 accomplishments include bull kelp enhancement, eelgrass restoration, and planting Olympia oysters. This request to authorize the Executive Director to enter into an interlocal agreement with Washington State Department of Natural Resources for Phase 2 helps meet Century Agenda objectives around habitat restoration as well as data monitoring and evaluation of carbon sequestration in urban environments. And so we have Sarah Auger, Director of Maritime Environment and Sustainability, and Kathleen Hurley, Senior Environmental Program Manager, to present. So I'll start with Sarah.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Executive Director, and hello, Commission members. Today we're going to talk to you to request your endorsement of an interlocal agreement to continue a really exciting project we've already been working on in Smith Cove. This is an interlocal agreement with the state DNR, we really do think it will help us learn more about how restoration occurs. Again, this is one particular site with restoration. We do a number of restoration activities, and I understand there may be some interest at some point for us to come forward and portray to you the broader restoration program, and we'd be happy to do that. So we'll continue talking with your staff about the potential need or interest for that. But specific to this project, the Smith Cove Blue Carbon, which Kathleen Hurley is going to tell us about in just a moment, I wanted to also thank the Commission. Due to your involvement early on, that's how this project started. Commission had some discretionary funding that you dedicated towards this project, and I believe one of your interns at the time also contributed to the idea and the scoping. So thank you so much for your participation and support for this project. We're pleased with the work from Phase 1 and excited to move to Phase 2 to learn more about how to restore in environments like these. So with that, I'd like to pass it back to Kathleen to tell you more about the proposal.
Thank you, Sarah, and good afternoon, Executive Director Metric and the Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit more about the status of the Smith Cove Blue Carbon project to date, as well as this request. Next slide, please. I'm here today to request authorization to execute a 5-year interlocal agreement with the Washington State Department of Natural Resources to support the second phase of monitoring for the Smith Cove Blue Carbon project. This continues the exciting work that has been underway at Smith Cove since 2018 to enhance marine ecosystems. This project will help advance these goals by expanding our understanding of carbon sequestration, potential of smaller eelgrass and algae habitats, as well as other submerged marine habitats. The long-term data collection will enable the Port to contribute to statewide objectives related to eelgrass beds and other marine ecosystems, water quality, and evaluate the carbon sequestration potential in urban environments. Furthermore, it will demonstrate the Port's regional leadership in achieving balanced economic and environmental benefits while providing a case study for other agencies and other entities that are interested in similar blue carbon projects. Next slide, please. Just as a reminder for those who may not have been involved back in 2018 when the Commission interned and then the Commission further supported the initial phase of this project, we initiated this, as I mentioned, in 2018 as a kelp eelgrass oyster enhancement pilot project at Smith Cove, which is by Magnolia Terminal 91. The goal of the project was to explore habitat enhancement techniques that could provide carbon sequestration, habitat, and water quality benefits. And this is critically important because kelp and eelgrass are recognized as keystone habitats for a wide range of fish and wildlife species in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. This project in Phase 1 has started to help us understand our knowledge and our ability to restore and enhance eelgrass beds as well as bull kelp and Olympia oysters, which are a native oyster here in the Pacific Northwest. A healthy Puget Sound and aquatic biome provide direct benefit to the Port's maritime tenants and our maritime economy. habitat restoration and creation, carbon sequestration, and researching means to reduce ocean acidification are all consistent with the Port's Century Agenda goals and objectives. Next slide, please. So I'd like to talk a little bit about phase one and what did we accomplish, what did we learn. I think this has been a really resounding success in terms of what we've learned. Science is an iterative process of attempting interventions and learning from some of our failures. So as I mentioned, this project involved enhancement of Olympia oysters. We outplanted in 2 areas in 2018 and 2021. As of 2023, the Olympia oyster populations are of moderate density. We see some recruitment, but we are certainly not at a spot where this is going to be a self-sustaining population yet. To just give you some context, we have about 25,000 sort of live Olympia oysters. You need 1 to 2 million in order to have a sustaining population. So we'll see what happens with that. In terms of the kelp intervention, that didn't work. The bull kelp intervention did not work. However, what that led us to was a partnership with the Seattle Aquarium to start monitoring kelp beds that were in and around the urban waterfront. It also led us to a different partnership with the Puget Sound Restoration Fund for monitoring our kelp beds that's in a larger network of 15 monitoring stations around Puget Sound. It's also led Washington State Department of Natural Resources to include some of our kelp sites in some of their aerial surveys. So in terms of successes, we've also built out a lot of partnerships and really highlighted these marine ecosystems that are along our waterfront. Additionally, I think also in terms of ecosystem benefits, the rock reefs that we placed that were intended for bull kelp, they actually subsequently became populated by a diverse number of species of algae that are also critically important for carbon sequestration, for biodiversity benefits. So it increased the potential carbon cycling capabilities in Smith Cove. The real exciting news, I think, is related to our eelgrass intervention. The average percent coverage of our plants within our enhancement area increased from 29% to 57% between 2018 and 2022. So this really indicates that the eelgrass is increasing in both aerial coverage as well as density. Eelgrass is known to sequester carbon. Will this small spot solve the ocean acidification issue for Puget Sound? No. But what it can do is provide a small area that is refugia for all these different organisms. The other really exciting result with the eelgrass intervention is what we found is that sea surface temperatures inside the eelgrass beds were actually lower than those areas that were outside the eelgrass bed that didn't have eelgrass. So this indicates to us that potentially this eelgrass area is providing some kind of buffering potential related to temperature, and that's critically important for all the organisms that utilize these eelgrass beds for every phase of their life, including salmon, including any number of fish, wildlife, shellfish. So, we've learned a lot in the past 5 years of this partnership, and as I mentioned, it's also enabled us to expand our ability to partner with other entities that are interested in doing this work and understanding these ecosystems along our waterfront. Next slide, please. So today, as I mentioned, I'm here to ask for authorization to approve an ILA for phase 2. This will continue our progress related to the Port of Seattle's our long-range objectives related to restoration, as I mentioned. It will also help us further expand our understanding of the benefits of these critical habitats in central Puget Sound, specifically related to ocean acidification, the ecosystem benefits, and habitat productivity. And then this will also add to this, the regional statewide long-term data collection. And this really enables the port to contribute knowledge and expertise applicable to kelp and eelgrass restoration, water quality, and this type of site. By working with DNR, this becomes part of the statewide monitoring system, which is fantastic. Next slide, please. So what are we proposing? It's a 5-year joint project, 2024 through 2029. The port would provide $227,000 in funding to DNR. We would provide access to the monitoring project and coordinate with designated DNR personnel for temporary use of port equipment and carrying out the monitoring project. And we'd also coordinate activities among DNR and our other various partners that I've mentioned before and interested community groups. Next slide, please. The DNR responsibilities, this funding will support staff time of natural resource scientists at various levels for the duration of the project. It will also support the collection and analysis, so the field work, and then the subsequent analysis of sediment samples to assess that carbon sequestration potential, as well as monitoring the site over time. This will also enable us to conduct vegetation surveys in the intertidal area, including the monitoring site in the state's acidification nearshore monitoring network. That's called the Anemone Network, and that is also involves volunteers from the community. So they have a big group of volunteers that come out and they maintain those stations a couple times a year, and they're able to get out and see this ecosystem. They also monitor for birds and other wildlife while they're out there. And then ultimately, DNR will provide a final report summarizing their findings in 2029. Next slide, please. So the project schedule generally includes this fall project planning and any permits for the coming year. And then DNR will collect surface sediments samples through 2025 through 2028, as well as the accretion monitoring, so basically looking at how the sediment is building up. That can be an indication of carbon sequestration. Also submerged aquatic vegetation monitoring, that's both algae, so seaweeds, and as well as eelgrass. And then reporting will happen annually with a final report in 2029. 2029 will not have any field work. It will be focused on data analysis and report writing. Next slide, please. And that's all I have, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions regarding this request. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for your presentation. I will start with Commissioner Fellman, since you pulled this item.
Well, thanks for that great presentation and the work that you do. The commission normally hears about building airport structures and what it takes to HVAC systems and things like this. And so building ecosystem structures, I just thought hearing about the kind of cool work that you do was half my reason for wanting you to pound your chest about this good work. I just learned a new word, portfolio park. What is portfolio?
Oh, the portfolio, I think, that was mentioned in the presentation relates to the port's, our plan, overall habitat restoration plan, and we call it the portfolio, a little play on words.
Got it. Got it. So it's our overall 40-acre aspirational.
Correct. And it also identifies sort of where we have opportunity for restoration in the future.
So yeah, I appreciate your candor, lessons learned, and all that stuff. But it's sort of one of the aquarium project, and I think one of those great things that you mentioned was this increasing partnership that, trying to find out, so why kelp here and eelgrass there, and that's sort of part of what I thought the aquarium, which I'm hoping these folks will learn about, that automated sled of thoughts.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Commissioner Fellman, is that this has led to a number of partnerships, and one is with the Seattle Aquarium, and we are, partway through our work with them to understand, as you said, the kelp enhancement didn't work at Smith Cove, but then we saw kelp thriving in areas that weren't really that far away geographically. And so that led us to the question of, well, why there and not here? And it led to a couple of different sort of prongs of research. One with Puget Sound Restoration Fund, we started doing annual bulb counts with them. We go out on the port boat with their scientists and we count bulbs to see how these floating kelp beds are changing annually. It also led to the work with the Seattle Aquarium, which we will be happy to brief this group on at a future date when we provide the overview of the habitat program. But certainly that's your question of why kelp, why here, why not there? That's what we're working on with the aquarium, as well as Puget Sound Restoration Fund with the Eyes on Kelp project, which is a monitoring station that will be installed this month. Actually, it might already be installed in front of Centennial Park. So it led to a lot of different initiatives and lines of questioning.
And one of the programs, I know this is not for aquaculture's sake, but for habitat restoration and all the good work you're doing in other parts of the Duwamish and things like that. But I know there's this seaweed collaborative that of all the other groups that collaborating with that Sea Grant runs, and they're really focused on the aquaculture world. But I always thought, in the green jobs idea world that we are also part of, and this anemone project where you have this citizen science, and I'm always looking for ways where we can have more tribal engagement with the kids who would be perfect citizen science contributors, and then also the fact that there are jobs in the field of habitat restoration as it applies to aquaculture. So I'm just wondering, they are also obviously learning techniques to do high volumes, which will have more sequestration and benefits like that. So to the degree we can continue to expand this collaboration with Sea Grant, I thought that as having these other multiplicative, century agenda goals being filled. So do you have any intentions of that?
Yeah, I haven't been as involved with the Seaweed Collective because our focus, as you said, has been more on the restoration piece, but certainly keeping a finger on the pulse of what's happening there and where there might be opportunities in the future. There are challenges with aquaculture in terms of permitting and getting that established, as we can know from folks on Vashon Island who've recently got their operations permitted. And one of the challenges we have at the port is that you need to own tidelands to undertake aquaculture, and we just don't own a lot of our tidelands. But I do think it's something that we need to keep our eyes on, and where we have opportunities, certainly continue to integrate those. And so I thank you for that encouragement to keep that door open.
But we're also experts at permitting. I mean, better than most, I think. And I always thought that area right around our smolts by the grain terminal is a place where cohabitating the kelp and the critter would be a place to look. So anyway, thanks so much for your presentation.
Thank you for your questions and comments, Commissioner Fellman. Commissioner Calkins.
Thank you, Kathleen, for a great presentation. I think one of the things that we have been learning through this whole process is how much we don't know when we go into this, that we keep being surprised by new wrinkles. The example that you gave was the algae took off, and that wasn't really the focus at the outset, but what it meant when you created an ecosystem that was beneficial to the algae. And in a recent conversation with a colleague at the Marine and Coastal Research Laboratory, one of the offshoots of the project, that a similar project that they're conducting, is the realization that it's actually what's under the seabed that is so mysterious and could be potentially enormously beneficial. I think he referred to it as the mycorrhiza, the sort of fungal layer that attaches to the plant's roots in that area, and it reminded me of the book Overstory, which is about trees and how much communication happens between the roots of trees. And all of this is to say, I think this work is helping us to be sort of surprised by wonder, and a reminder that these ecosystems are so much more complex than any of us can deign to imagine at the outset. And so doing this kind of work may lead us in directions that we didn't anticipate at the outset, but it's so crucial that we conduct this work. So thank you so much.
Oh, Commissioner Fellman, you pulled it. You can ask as many
All
questions.
right, well, I'm gonna stop because we have a short meeting. I don't want to blow that. But I understand, like with climate change, that eelgrass is expected to survive better, and because there's more like oxygen in the CO2 in the water, and their plants, right? So it's kind of going to be interesting just to see overall whether eelgrass will start doing better. But we're doing water quality monitoring as well, and there is this interesting juxtaposition with our large cruise ship terminals just adjacent to the site. And so I know there are dilution zones and all that, but this is quite proximal. So I'm just wondering, are we looking at any gradients, looking at declines to evaluate whether this has any contribution?
Mainly where we're looking at is the anemone station. I think what's interesting is that there was recently a study that came out that indicated that shellfish in the proximity of eelgrass actually had different smell and also had different contaminant loading. And so that indicates that eelgrass is really this super ecosystem that's critically important globally. And not only for carbon sequestration, but also for as a nursery ground and whatnot. And So I think that as we move forward with this work, and the anemone station does look at water, physical parameters of water. We haven't been doing any sort of chemistry, but that's certainly there. As we proceed with DNR, I think that could be on the table, depending on how this next phase goes. And but I think that's a really important question.
So it's temperature you're monitoring?
Temperature, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Very good. Any additional questions or comments? Hearing no further questions for this item, is there a motion and a second to approve item 8G?
So moved.
Second.
Great. The motion was made and seconded. Commissioners, are there any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, Clerk Hart, please call the roll for the vote. Commissioners, please say aye or nay when your names are called.
Thank you. Beginning with Commissioner Calkins.
Aye.
Thank you. Sorry, I should have started with Commissioner Felleman.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Cho.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Hasagawa.
Aye.
Thank you. And Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you. 5 ayes, 0 nays for this item.
Great. The motion passes. Very good. Moving us along in the agenda, we have 3 new business items today. Clerk Hart, please read the first item into the record. It's my understanding that V. Nguyen, the Commission's strategic advisor, will then introduce the item.
Thank you. This is agenda item 10A, introduction of resolution number 3827, a resolution in opposition of Washington State ballot initiative measure number 2117 concerning carbon tax credit trading.
Hello, Commissioners and members of the public. My name is V. Nguyen with the Commission Office for the record. I'm joined by John Flanagan, Senior State Relations Manager, to answer any questions you might have at the end of this short presentation. So this item of new business is the first reading of Resolution 3827 to oppose Initiative 2117, a Washington State ballot initiative concerning carbon tax credit trading. Resolution 3827 creates a formal position for the Port of Seattle on I-2117. Other jurisdictions that have adopted resolutions on I-2117 include Kenmore, Shoreline, Berrien, Redmond, and Lake Forest Park, joining a coalition of over 400 organizations in several tribal nations across Washington State opposing the initiative. I-2117 would repeal the Climate Commitment Act. Throughout the legislative process of the CCA in Olympia, the Port of Seattle tracked its development and remained supportive of its goals to fight climate change and building a green economy. The Climate Commitment Act funds areas of work that have strong alignment with all of Port of Seattle's Century Agenda goals, especially our goal of being the greenest and most energy-efficient port in North America. Example of bodies of work where the CCA and the port is aligned includes habitat restoration, advancing sustainable alternative fuels and/or clean renewable energy, electrifying ports, increasing access to green careers, and reducing the impact of greenhouse gas emissions and pollution. Another priority area for the port and the Northwest Seaport Alliance, supported by the CCA, is advancing electrification through shore power and zero-emission vehicle infrastructure and fleets as one way for both agencies to get closer to meeting the goals of the Northwest Ports Clean Air Strategy. Both agencies have allocated funding in the enacted state budget that could be cut if I-2117 passes. $14 million for the shore power demonstration project at the NWSA in the 2024 budget is at risk, as is $250,000 to support the port's Sustainable Maritime Fuels Collaborative. If 2117 passes, these programs and other port priorities eligible for CCA funding will continue, but these port priorities will mostly rely on local funding, which will present a challenge to meet the scale of need and opportunity for constituents, businesses, and communities. Staff have been working to analyze impacts to the port if 2117 passes. You will be briefed with budget season, and John is here to take you through some of the tables in his memo and to answer additional questions.
Thank you, V. For the record, thanks, Michelle. For the record, John Flanagan with board staff. I'm just talking you quickly through some of the numbers. You have a lot of numbers in the memo in front of you. Table 1 shows the overall financial impact of Initiative 2117. It's negative $3.8 billion over the next 5 fiscal years to the state's underlying budget. That's because of the reduction in actual credits being sold. That includes about $1.7 billion in funding that's already been allocated, which obviously impacts priorities that the port advocated for in this past session down in Olympia. Table 2 really just shows you transportation impacts. That's SARA, the climate emission reductions account. It's mainly stuff at WashDOT. Table 3 is the climate commitment account. That's your other kind of general catch-all for environmental priorities. Table 4 mainly is called out because it shows the impact to salmon and culvert removal funding. As you're all already aware, we are required by 2030 to fix 80% of problematic fish barriers in the state. The state's already spent about $4 billion. They think they need to spend about $8 billion more. And this is gutting all of the funding that is even going into the small amount of projects that are still ongoing. And then tables 5, 6, and 7 there are the transportation, operations, and capital budgets with some highlights for projects that we were supportive of during this past session. Some key projects include, as V mentioned, medium and heavy-duty ZEV vouchers, the Seaport Alliance's Shore Power Demonstration Project funding for high-speed rail, offshore wind supply chain, Blue Wind, continuation of the Sustainable Maritime Fuels Work Group, air quality grants, and then various hard-to-decarbonize green jobs and local energy project programs that we've been supportive of in the past. I'll stop there.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions on this item?
I was going to defer, but
Commissioner Calkins.
John, maybe you could speak to us a little bit about what analysis has been done in terms of commercial competitiveness for us as a state as we look ahead to where our economy is moving in the next 20 years. What you've listed here are a bunch of investments in our ability to move people and goods. And if we zero out that account, what does that mean for Washington State if we're unable to repair the roads, the bridges, the ferries, literally the vehicles on our network of roads? What happens if we can't make those investments?
So I'll say this, I haven't seen any official analysis done or anything published on the topic, but I think that is probably the greatest fear we have with this repeal. It's not like funding for these priorities or defunding these priorities is going to cause the legislature to abandon them completely. What it's more going to cause is a shift as we focus with fewer resources at hand. How do we spend those dollars? The impacts that the CCA repeal will have on state transportation funding, for example, are massive. We will see project costs shift. We will see funding that is currently going into high-speed rail, for example, shifted back towards covering debts we have on completion of the Gateway project, maybe. With that, there are also other, frankly, incalculable examples, like with high-speed rail again. I think removing the $25 million that we currently have in the budget that goes towards federal match will actually cause the state to lose access to almost $400 million in federal grants that we are currently accessing with that $25 million. So to your point, this bleeds over very quickly into every other part of the budget, and the fiscal impacts are frankly incalculable in a lot of ways.
It just feels to me like metaphorically flipping that sign on your small business from open to closed. We're not open for business anymore. We're not going to invest in infrastructure. So if you were an investor, a big industry, I mean, it's telling who is supporting this. It is companies who are saying, we believe we can grow here in this state, and we're going to put our money where our mouth is. And as a port entity interested in continuing to see healthy business activity with the support of labor unions and environmental groups, I think this is it's critical for our operations in particular.
I don't hear a question there, but I'll say yeah.
Great. Commissioner Feldman?
I'm just really impressed by the documentation of all these things. This is, the enumeration of the impact is better than just saying, $3.5 billion, whatever. It's puts the kind of meat on the bones. And so I really appreciate all that work, and obviously support opposing this initiative. But the one thing I was, as a member of K4C, the King County Climate Coalition, there's all these different cities, but King County cannot, tell them what to do. They're not they're an independent body under one roof. But sharing this information with the cities of K4C as well as K4C would be something I'd greatly appreciate you doing. So thank you for all this work, and it was great.
Great. Any additional questions or comments?
Yeah.
Commissioner Cho?
I think, I share the sentiments of my colleagues and of the staff of the port that, as an agency that has made some pretty aggressive commitments around reducing greenhouse gases as well as sustainability, that, not just cap and trade, but also everything else that's encompassed in the Climate Commitment Act is crucial for us as an organization and as an agency to reach those goals. And so I'm also in firmly support of this resolution to oppose Initiative 2117. I think it's really important for us to take a long-term view on a lot of these things, and sometimes it's really hard to see what's further out when you see the impacts of today, but these are smart investments that we're making. I think you make a really good point around what we stand to lose if we don't do this, right? The federal funding out there, I go around and talk a lot about how between the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law, there are billions of dollars out there for a once-in-a-generation opportunity, so to speak, to do a lot of the work that we were committed to doing already, quite frankly. But as a state, we've made a statement to invest in partnership with our federal partners and some of the stakeholders who are here in the room today. Quite frankly, and I think as a Port Authority, we're really blessed to have partners and stakeholders who are willing to work with us on this. And so now is the opportunity and the time for us to capitalize on it. And it would be a huge mistake if we were to roll back some of the good work that the state legislature has done. So I'm looking forward to voting in favor.
Great. Commissioner Hasagawa?
Thank you, Madam President. Commissioners, 3 months ago, I stood at a press conference with Governor Inslee at Terminal 5, which is our state-of-the-art facility demonstrating best practices, environmental sustainability for our container ships and cargo industry. It represents not just shore power, but state-of-the-art stormwater and accommodations for heavy infrastructure machinery to be able to operate that at a low or zero carbon basis. And this is just the beginning. We are building upon all of these investments, and it represents, importantly, multiple millions of dollars of investment from the state. We are so fortunate to have had the championship of President Biden and Vice President Harris and their administration that passed revolutionary investments into updating our nation's infrastructure, including right here at home. And we would be remiss to not build upon that and seize that by continuing by rolling back the infrastructure that we have at the state to be able to create access to revenues for our ports across Washington state. I strongly support resolution number 3827, which would establish the Port of Seattle Commission's opposition to Washington State Ballot Initiative 2117. No on 2117 is so important for the Port of Seattle to be able to continue to build towards a carbon neutral future. The repeal of the Climate Commitment Act, which is a crucial tool in our fight against climate change, would devastate our states, our environment, our plans at the Port of Seattle. $3.2 billion in CCA revenues for the 2023 to 2025 biennium have been appropriated for a myriad of efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It doesn't just improve our terminals, but it's our buildings, and it has special provisions in it for us to be able to address impacts of environmental injustices. Repealing the CCA would also jeopardize the port's progress toward reducing greenhouse gas emissions and transitioning to cleaner energy sources, like threatening funding for port projects in the pipeline, joint projects for the Northwest Seaport Alliance, and future projects. We hope that this is going to be a leadership action demonstrating to other jurisdictions that they too can take a stance against 2117. This commission is committed to leading the way in sustainable practices and innovation, and committed to leading the way in taking a stance against harmful actions such as 2117. For that reason, Madam President, I move to waive the first reading and adopt the resolution number 3827 as presented before us today.
Very good. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Great. Clerk Hart, I can call a vote without
A formal motion is not needed for this, Madam Commission President. You can just have non-objection to that second reading, and that would waive it.
Okay, beautiful. So without no objections, I would like to consolidate the introduction and adoption for this item today. And then we can call the vote for that.
Okay.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I also just want to say I strongly support my colleagues on this and glad that we're moving this forward. It does not only jeopardize future projects that we have coming down the pipe, but also existing projects that we're working on, initiatives right now, such as the Clean Truck Program as well, and the list goes on. So I'm glad that we're bringing this forward, and thank you to Commissioner Hasegawa for waiving the first reading. Clerk Hart, please call the vote.
This is for adoption of resolution number 3827, beginning with Commissioner Calkins.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Cho.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Hasegawa.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you. 5 ayes, 0 nays for this item.
Very good. The motion passes. All right, Commissioners, I will need to actually recuse myself for participating on the next agenda item related to the City of Seattle's transportation levy on the November ballot. I understand Commissioner Cho will also need to recuse himself as well. Is that correct, Commissioner Cho? That's correct. Great. As such, Commission Vice President Hasegawa, will you be able to preside over this item while Commissioner Cho and I leave the room?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. So give me your gavel.
Thank you. All right, at this time, I will invite my colleagues to recuse themselves.
Thank you.
Where are we? Can I have the script, please?
Oh, other side.
Perfect. All right, please note for the record that Commissioners Cho and Mohammed have exited the room. Clerk Hart, please read the next item into the record, and V. Winst, Commission Strategic Advisor, will then introduce the item.
Thank you, Madam Commission Vice President. This is item number 10B, introduction of resolution number 3828, a resolution endorsing City of Seattle Proposition Number 1 concerning replacing funding for citywide transportation maintenance and improvements, the 2024 transportation levy.
All right. Hello again, Commissioners and members of the public. I am still V. Nguyen with the Commission Office for the record. Today I'm joined by Jerry Poor, Regional Transportation Senior Manager, here to answer questions you might have at the end of this short dialogue. This item of new business is the first reading of Resolution 3828 in support of the City of Seattle's 2024 Transportation Levy, aka the Keep Seattle Moving Levy. This resolution creates a formal position for the Port of Seattle on the Keep Seattle Moving Levy. Attachment A to this document set details line item investments and the amount. Throughout the development of this levy, Port of Seattle staff monitored deliberations and met with city leaders to advocate for port priorities. Of particular importance to the Port of Seattle and the Northwest Seaport Alliance are investments to freight improvements, significant resources towards climate change resiliency, reducing air pollution, and investments to increase sustainable transportation options through EV charging infrastructure, and finally, dedicated resources to good governance and equitable implementation of the levy. The Keep Seattle Moving Levy proposes important investments in transportation and transit infrastructure essential to our operations via access to port facilities and the transport of goods. There are also proposed investments and updates to pedestrian, bike, and transit infrastructure, which will enhance safety for people moving through neighborhoods and communities. This supports our regional economic development efforts in tourism and cruise, and it is vital to the quality of life of residents and visitors. Overall, the Keep Seattle Moving Levy package will be a key resource to support Port of Seattle operations and economic development strategies and our overall region's economic vitality. Thank you. Jerry?
Thank you. I'm available for questions if you have any details.
Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments? Commissioner Fellman.
Again, another very well-written resolution, so thank you for the authorship. I think what was kind of interesting about this was sort of the connection that Commissioner Calkins was making about the previous levy and how much, while it's transportation, it has all this other green components to it, essential infrastructure for us to do our work, at the same time dealing with things like culverts and other issues like that. So anyway, I also really appreciate the level of detail that we can share with the public about enumerating what this means. So thank you very much. I look forward to supporting it.
Commissioner Calkins.
I guess the thing that I would say about this levy that I really appreciate is that it focuses on infrastructure for residents and workers in the city of Seattle. That I think oftentimes over the last couple of generations, a lot of the improvements we've made to our transportation corridors has been to accommodate long commuters, let's say. And I'm really grateful that we're taking an opportunity to add to that kind of funding that supports pedestrians and bikers and last mile delivery vehicles and freight that's coming from our ports to our distribution centers, all of which occur entirely within the city of Seattle. And so I haven't heard a lot of discussion about that, but for me, we do need to make sure that Seattle works for folks who live and work in Seattle.
Seeing no further questions, there's none from me. Thank you so much for bringing the item. Is there a motion and a second to introduce resolution number 3828?
Madam Commission Vice President, would you also like to waive the second reading on this item?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Would you also like to waive the second reading on this item and have adoption for today?
It's my colleague's prerogative if they'd like to make that motion.
I would move to waive introduction and move directly to adoption.
Okay.
I need a second.
So pleasantly moved.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded to waive the first reading and adopt resolution number 3828, Keep Seattle Moving, as introduced. Clerk Hart, are there any objections? Seeing none, Clerk Hart, please call the roll.
Thank you. Beginning with Commissioner Calkins.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Fellman.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Hasagawa.
Aye.
Thank you. 3 ayes, 0 nays for this item.
The motion carries. Thank you very much. And can somebody please bring my colleagues back into the room, and I will pass the gavel back over to President Mohammed.
Commission President Mohammed has asked for a 5-minute break.
And the time is 1:24. We are at recess.
Thank you.
She was concerned I was going to.
Up there.
Yeah, sit over there.
Clerk Hart? You ready? Thanks for those suggestions.
When you're ready.
Okay. All right, bringing us back. The time is now 1:33, so we are coming back from recess at this time. Clerk Hart, please read the next item into the record, and I believe Executive Director Metrick will introduce the item. This is order number 2024-10.
Thank you. And this is an order to require the executive director to consider the attainment of greenhouse gas reduction goals before the renewal of any long-term cruise agreement.
Commissioners, before we turn this over to the Commission Office for introduction of the order, I want to share my support for this order and the actions that it directs. Our Maritime Division, led by Stephanie Jones-Stebbins, and our Environment and Sustainability Department, led by Sandy Kilroy, working in partnership with the Commission, continue to press forward towards our goal to become the greenest and most energy-sufficient port in North America. And we continue to press forward as a leader in demonstrating how ports can drive industry change as being a leader in those change. So I thank you for your work on this issue and consideration of the order in front of you today. Thank you.
Mr. Metrick?
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam President, Commissioners, Executive Director Metrick. My name is Francis Cho, Commission Strategic Advisor. I am pleased to introduce Order Number 2024-10, an order to require the Executive Director to consider the attainment of greenhouse gas reduction goals before the renewal of any long-term cruise agreement. I'll take a pause. This order is introduced thanks to the leadership of Commission Vice President Hasegawa and Commissioner Calkins. Next year, the Port of Seattle is anticipating nearly 1.8 million revenue passengers and receiving over 300 cruise calls, resulting in over $900 million in economic benefit to the region. While the growth of the cruise industry will continue to provide significant economic benefits to the region, without the adoption of zero and low carbon energy alternatives, it will also lead to an increase in greenhouse gas and other air emissions. This order, if adopted, would affirm the urgency of the climate crisis and ensure accountability for greenhouse gas and other air emissions reductions. Order number 2024-10 would direct the Executive Director to evaluate and publicize cruise lines' attainment of the ports and International Maritime Organization's greenhouse gas reduction goals before renewing or extending a home-ported cruise line's long-term agreements. It also affirms that the port shall continue to ban exhaust gas cleaning system wash water discharge at berth through the tariff and advocate for the continued voluntary moratorium on the discharging of exhaust gas cleaning system wash water in Puget Sound. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, I will first start with questions or comments from Commission Vice President Hasegawa.
Thank you very much, President Mohammed, and thank you so much, Strategic Advisor Cho, for introducing the item. I am very pleased to offer this before you today for consideration. I'd like to acknowledge the incredible progress that the Port of Seattle as an institution has made, particularly over the past few years in working specifically on within the maritime industry and with the cruise lines. We have made significant investments in renewable energy and have enhanced and even accelerated our efforts to support emission reduction initiatives. And this commitment is a testament to our collective commitment towards a greener future. We take immense pride in creating the Green Cruise Corridor, for example, which was established in 2022 to promote sustainable practices among cruise lines and reduce environmental impacts. The corridor is a collaboration and partnership with home-ported cruise lines and other jurisdictions, which created a framework for sustainable practices, and it also accelerated the deployment of zero greenhouse gas emission ships, which sets a new standard for the industry. As we continue to work with home-ported cruise lines and stakeholders, the port aims to expand our reach and influence by supporting the fuel transition for the cruise line industry and the best practices that they can model while reducing its impact on the environment. Earlier this year, the Commission took 2 key actions to advance our sustainability goals while reducing greenhouse gas emissions, minimizing the cruise line industry's environmental impacts, and providing local economic development opportunities within the region. First, we accelerated a shore power requirement for cruise vessels, thanks to the leadership of Commissioner Felleman, along with staff, leaning into the belief that we can achieve energy sustainability while investing in economic opportunities and minimizing our impact on our communities and the climate. Second, and most recently, we approved a 10-year agreement with Carnival Corporation that added ambitious environmental sustainability and social dimensions that benefit the greater Seattle region and help accelerate the work underway. These agreements are broadly understood to be one of the port's primary tools in working with home-ported cruise lines, not just from a business perspective, but to establish expectations and commitments necessary to drive meaningful change. They help each cruise line understand the Port of Seattle's sustainability objectives as outlined in our Century Agenda goals. And key aspects of the most recent agreement include Carnival having 100% shore power capable vessels by 2026, agreeing to bunker non-fossil fuel as a demonstration project this last year and trying it again next year as well, with an iterative process with staff to make sure that we're hitting and accelerating our goals, and working together to draw broader awareness, particularly with the federal and state government, on these non-fossil fuel tests in order to be able to expand support. I'd also like to acknowledge the iterative process that Commissioner Felleman and myself engaged in with our environmental and sustainability and maritime team in order for over the last year to get to that agreement to where it was. And I'd just like to point out that there were not folks in the room paying attention to that body of work. The work in a bureaucratic process is a myriad of multiple steps to build upon the other in order to make meaningful progress and change. And this is the next step, building upon that body of work. Today, I'm proud to introduce this order, co-sponsored by Commissioner Calkins, that builds upon what we as a commission have done this year to accelerate our sustainability and climate action and even social justice goals. This order requires the executive director to consider cruise line greenhouse gas reduction goals before renewing or extending any long-term cruise agreement. It calls for publicizing cruise line emissions trends and emission reduction projects underway to attain greenhouse gas reduction goals so that stakeholders and the public are aware of what we're doing and our progress. And it also reaffirms the port's commitment to clean water as it bans exhaust gas cleaning system wash water discharge at berth. It does do that. And it does that through the tariff and advocates for the continued voluntary moratorium on discharging exhaust gas cleaning system wash water throughout Puget Sound. Much of the cruise lines industry's enforcement and jurisdiction is within the federal government's jurisdiction, oversight, and responsibility. Our job is to think about what we have within our direct control and within our influence. And we are pulling on all of those levers. So, by setting the bar and expectations for all, the Port of Seattle can continue its leadership in promoting environmental stewardship within the cruise industry. I'd like to acknowledge and thank staff for the engagement that they did in order to make sure that cruise lines understand the implications of this order. I'd like to acknowledge members of the industry who are in the room today who have sat within discomfort and known and come willingly to say, we're willing to sit into that discomfort to do our best. And I'd most importantly like to acknowledge the environmental advocates and workers in the room who have consistently come in to share their stories and share the values of the public. Thank you to all of my colleagues for your support, and thank you again to our staff who've worked so hard to bringing this forward.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Hasegawa, for your leadership on this and for bringing it forward. Commissioner Calkins, do you have comments?
Yeah, my first comment is it's never fun to follow Toshko. As we worked on this this order, I think one of the things that I didn't anticipate was it's being perceived as something that I don't think it is. And so while I think it might be taken as us trying to toot our horns or a celebration of some sort, I soundly reject that. This is not a celebration. This is an exhortation. We're asking our partners, our peers, and our employees to give this the gravity that it requires in order to achieve the long-term goals that we have for this. And I'm reminded of, I came into the Clean Trucks program midway, and actually towards the end of the original Clean Trucks program. And we were struggling to meet the goal that we had set as a collective commission in 2008, in 2018. And a part of that, as we did the analysis after the fact, was that we had not consistently benchmarked progress from the get-go. They passed the resolution, and then it sort of sat on a shelf for a while. And then by the time it was, the deadline was about to hit, it was too late to effectively get that program up and running and achieve what it achieved. So we had to extend the deadline by a year. And Now, it turned out to be an excellent program and have enormous benefits for our communities and our port workers. But we don't want to make that same mistake of failing to benchmark the goals that we set for zero emissions. And what this is one of those benchmarks. And so if you ask me, am I satisfied with it? No, I'm not satisfied with it. That's not the point. It is an evaluation at the quarter mile for how I'm doing in my attempt to run a mile. Now, if I get that gold medal at the end of the month, then yeah, we can celebrate. If we hit our zero emissions goals, great, we can celebrate then. We're not celebrating today. We're saying, how are we doing at midpoints along this, and what do we need to do to accelerate if we're falling behind? And I think it's also helpful to just give a little bit of a reminder of the steps that have been taken. I mean, you know, we are 23, 24 years into cruise, and there have been steps along the way to improve the environmental impacts of cruise. We have a long way to go. And I recall in August of 21 sitting right in this chair and saying, we need to set a date for zero emissions cruise. And the response was pretty incredulous. And yet in just 3 short years, because of excellent work by Commissioner Fellman on shore power, by this order that you're bringing forward, and quite honestly, as you mentioned, Commissioner Hasegawa, the everyday work of staff to drive that sentiment forward, to get partners at the table for the first in the world green cruise corridor in the Pacific Northwest to Alaska corridor, which is now broadening scope to draw in even more forms of shipping between here and Alaska, so that the impact will be not only global on cruise, but bigger in the regional impact. That is real progress that would not have happened had it not been for those incremental steps that we took. And I see this as an incremental step toward that as well. But no, I'm not satisfied with it. We have a lot more work to go. I just need our peers and partners and employees to know that we are deadly serious about these goals and that we will put time and resources to achieving them.
Well said. Thank you, Commissioner Calkins, and thank you for your leadership on bringing this order forward as well. Any additional comments?
Yeah, I'll take a
Commissioner
stab.
Cho?
Yeah, thank you, President Mohammed. I also want to first and foremost thank my colleagues, Commissioner Hasegawa and Commissioner Calkins, for spearheading this. And I also want to take a moment to acknowledge those who have taken the time to voice their concerns as well as their thoughts around cruise more largely, but also this order. You know, I can accept the fact that, you know, nothing we do here is perfect, and you could argue, you know, some have argued that it's better not to pass this, maybe perhaps, but one of the principles that I've always abided by is to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And what we have in front of us today is fundamentally good. I don't think anyone would dispute that. It might not go as far as others might want, and I understand that, and I don't necessarily disagree with it. But as leaders, we are forced to play the hand that we are dealt. And the reality is that we are one of many ports in the world and around the country that have a cruise industry. And given that fact, we as a port are obligated to be leaders in the industry and set an example. And I believe this is what we're doing through this order. And so, again, I just want to thank Commissioner Hasegawa and Commissioner Calkins, but also Commissioner Fellman for all the work that they've spearheaded in making sure that we are a world leader and setting the example. There's no question that the Port of Seattle is looked to for guidance on matters of sustainability, but in particular in the cruise industry. And so I give a lot of props to both Sandy Kilroy's team and Stephanie Jones-Stebbins for really putting some of these innovative mechanisms that we're utilizing to the forefront, not being afraid to push our stakeholders to adopt some of these things that they might not see at other ports. And so in that light, I also feel like I need to thank our industry partners, our tenants, and those who operate within our jurisdiction who continue to work with us to have these uncomfortable conversations. But one thing that I want to conclude on is that we're all on the same team here, right? We all want the same things. I think that's really important for us to highlight when we are nitpicking at the nuances of these types of orders and or policies, just to level set and remind ourselves that we are all trying to get to the same goal. And while we might have disagreements around how we get there, or how quickly we should get there, or if we should do this, or if we should do that, this is part of the process, this dialogue, the engagement, and chipping away at the obstacles. And so I just want to thank everyone all around. Thank you to Steve for taking it in stride. And again, thanks to my colleagues for being leaders on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Cho, for those comments. Commissioner Fellman.
Thank you again for drafting these things. They never come easy, and all the work that goes into editing. That truck analogy I was very much involved with that history. But not only did we not set the benchmarks well, or track the benchmarks, it was clear that they thought it was sort of like it was whether it was a requirement or an advisory. It's like the truckers we felt the year before it's like, but I thought it was like a nudge and a wink. Whereas in Seattle we were being much more explicit. So that was the argument that articulating this message in clarity is one of the values of doing this, making clear. But clearly it's still advisory, but we are putting it expressly in front, and I think that's a good contribution to this effort. It's certainly different than the requirement that only cruise ships come 2027 can plug in. That's explicit, but one of the things that I think is really my little contribution to this effort was to add the word publicize, and that if indeed in the terms of transparency, how well are we doing? So when the executive makes this evaluation, it's based on information that we could all understand. We have the organizational goals, we have the IMO goals, and then how much credit do we give towards meeting those goals? Well, the public has to know what that is. And one of the, it's not to be critical of this particular effort, but I think, applicable to all these greenhouse gas ambitions across all sectors, everybody has a different, baseline. So it's 50% from 2008, 75% from 2007. I mean, what the net carbon reduction is, I think, it's important you make progress proportional to what you do, but unless you know what the absolute number is, how do you compare one to the other? And so, it's a way to normalize this is, I think, it's sort of essential across the field. And I think that we can do this for our work. And part of, the dashboard that our staff have been developing, all this information can be, again, transparent for the public. They shouldn't have to PDR us to get this information. And hopefully we'll have something good to show for ourselves. And I think we obviously have demonstrated enough, to demonstrate our commitment. How far it goes will be seen into the future. These are big, ambitious targets. But I would like to know, at the end of the day, how many hundreds of tons did we eliminate? And then for the public to then understand, how many cars did we take off the road? And just making it real. Percents of baselines that make no sense to anybody. They sounds good, but I'd like to know what it really means. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Hasagawa, and then I'll go back to Commissioner Calkins.
Yeah, I just wanted to also elaborate a little bit on some of what Commissioner Cho was saying about leading the industry globally. We are the cruise industry is working so hard to crack this nut. And there have been advancements that have been made within the cruise industry that are not yet, we're still not seeing yet within the shipping industry. And when we are passing pieces of legislation like this, when we are working together with staff to get new ideas, when we're thinking through the functionality of making progress towards our goals in a way that's measurable and transparent to the public, we're able to take that back to our other body of work as knowledge gained as managing members of the Northwest Seaport Alliance in the most trade-dependent state in the nation. So what happens within the cruise industry matters not just for the cruise industry globally. It matters for maritime. And that's why we have partners in maritime in the room today saying that this is important. So nothing is operating within a silo. We are thinking across the spectrum. And competition is healthy. And so when we're seeing what the progress that a cruise line like Carnival is making through our lease agreements, and we're saying that we're going to evaluate progress towards that, it incentivizes others to be able to be audacious. And it might come as a surprise, but there are folks within the industry who really want to push the envelope on sustainability internally. And this gives them the basis to be able to really advocate for that. And I am deeply grateful for them to advising us at every step of the way on how to make this what it is. So I do see it as a valuable yet incremental step. I just wanted to lift that up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Hasegawa. Commissioner Calkins.
I was just going to ask if Sandy could come up and give us a quick little update on a little bit more technical question, which is one of the, as the Pacific Northwest to Alaska Green Corridor has undertaken, has come together and identified some early work product. Can you give us a sense of what studies you're going to be conducting to help us get toward that zero emissions shipping vessel movement between here and Alaska?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you. Sandy Kilroy, Senior Director, Environment and Sustainability. As was mentioned, the Green Corridor from in the Pacific Northwest, from us to Alaska, has been a tremendous effort to bring the parties together who are all critical in developing that zero emission shipping future. And one of the things that we're currently working on is a feasibility study for using e-methanol on 4 ships, cruise ships, by the year 2032. So this has been a collaborative effort to scope this feasibility study, and every partner is taking different work streams of this effort. And the ports in particular, Port of Seattle and Vancouver Fraser Port Authority, are specifically looking at the storage and bunkering of e-methanol from our port-specific role. And then the cruise lines are looking at, of course, ships, and then we have someone looking at production. So this feasibility study that is just getting underway will give us a lot of information on the one path of looking at e-methanol as a fuel that we could use to transition. The other thing coming out of this work group, the Green Corridor work group, is looking at emissions inventories. To Commissioner Fellman's point, we think it's important to do well to wake. We think it's important to do annual inventories to the extent we can. And so this collaboration that includes the cruise lines is looking at new methodologies of how we can calculate well to wake emissions inventory for the corridor, for the whole corridor. So a really exciting work happening, and we're happy to be providing updates along the way as this feasibility study proceeds. Does that get?
Yeah, that's
what
great.
you're looking for?
In hearing these kind of recent news items about the progress toward the viability of a large cruise ship running on something like e-methanol, it's actually, it makes me more optimistic that we can get there sooner than possible. I mean, the first methanol-ready ship just floated out like a week ago, I think, in Germany. So this is not science fiction. We can do this. And granted, methanol is only as green as how it's produced. And so we also need to figure out how we source the methanol. And I think that's another example of how this green corridor is contributing to the other green corridor conversation we're having, which is how do we move big ships across oceans? And in a strong partnership with South Korea, we are examining that very question and the potential for a symbiotic relationship between those two vessel types, the cruise ships plying the Alaska route and the trans-Pacific ships going between here and Korea, both potentially using methanol. That is a big potential opportunity for us. And so the fact that we're investing in that research to not only figure out how to use it, but how to source it, I think is really critical to advancing this work too.
Yeah, and I think the point you just made is it's about aggregating demand in specific areas. And so with the Seaport Alliance also looking at green methanol, it allows us to really leverage kind of the full maritime industry in terms of aggregating that demand and attracting fuel producers to this region.
Thanks, Sandy.
Thank you.
Great, this is a good discussion. Commissioner Fellman.
Well, thanks. We're sort of veering a little bit beyond the resolution, but I am very much excited about trying to create incentives for fuel switching, and and we've been trying to do this with the airlines for quite a few years. There are all sorts of financial incentives, and we're still doing a pretty horrible job of making a real dent in the impact. And a lot of that has to do with production. Obviously cost is still an issue, but there are ways that they could probably pass on the cost a little bit if there was fuels to burn. And I know we've had a lot of concerns, conversations about, well, how do you get the producers here? And when we had our workshop some time ago with the SAF folks and had Ray Mabus and telling us to make ambitious goals, and the industry said, the refining industry said, basically, give us like a 10-year offtake agreement. You don't have to give me anything. I'll just build a refinery, or retrofit, more likely, a refinery. And it's just like somebody has to just say, I'm going to do it. And if you do it at bulk levels for a long enough time, you can negotiate a price. In fact, at the regular annual meeting of the innovation group over at the Norwegian folks at the Norway National Museum, I think, or Norwegian National Museum? No. Nordic National Museum. They changed the name, and actually Senator Campbell said it was the most controversial thing she did because Minnesota and Michigan were going to beat her up. But the idea, though, that I had a chance, Carnival Corp was there, and Nestle was there. And I go, talk amongst yourselves. We sat down and set them up with a breakfast, whatever. And but then, that's what needs to happen. Those guys have to make a long-term commitment. The airlines need to make a long-term commitment and get the price to a place. And we'll continue to create goodwill, but that's one of the things that I think is really kind of essential to this. But while we wait to do this, which has been taking a long time, there are things that can be done operationally tomorrow. And this is the part that I'm a little concerned that we have these long-range goals that are really good, and we need to create the momentum to keep them going. But when we went to the IAPH in London, the concern was, how do you relate greenhouse gas reductions with noise reductions on ships? And sometimes they can be at odds with each other. Not always. But one of the ways you can just do it tomorrow is just pull back on the throttle. And slow steaming gets you across the ocean much more efficiently, to the degree we're now a member of FLOW, which is this better predictability when a vessel comes to the dock, so the longshore are there and the trucks don't have to idle, just to have a supply chain efficiency so that the vessel doesn't have to speed across the ocean but gets there on time, doesn't sit at anchor, doesn't have to wait for the crew. With the cruise lines, though, it's more of a challenge because it's a bus schedule. We have to hit each port at a certain time. But also, there's a challenge as there's more and more cruises of larger size that there's pushback on the community, by the communities, as we have now yet another initiative on the ballot up in Alaska. But so one of the things I've thought for the cruise lines, and I know it's a subject of discussion, is the ability to miss a stop, right? And and more people have the cruise is the hotel, and that you basically can sightsee, but not drop ashore. So obviously, you still have to have your Alaska city experience, but in fact, you can go slower, miss a stop or two, see your glaciers, don't inundate your communities, and immediately reduce your greenhouse gas because you have not been racing to get to your next port of call. So I just would like to have these corridor conversations, talk about quiet green corridors that don't have to wait for anything other than better planning. End of story.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Fellman, for those additional comments. Are there any other comments from my colleagues? All right, so I will be moving us along, but before I do again just want to thank Commission Vice President Hasegawa for bringing this order forward, and again, Commissioner Culkins for co-sponsoring it. I underscore everything you all have said, and I think the one other thing that I would just add to that is the fact that the port has demonstrated leadership in this area, and that we are exceeding our goals when it comes to both Scope 1 and Scope 2 reductions. We're hitting those targets, and really when we're talking about Scope 3, it's partnership. We are talking about external partners, and what I see this order doing most is directing the executive director to bring our partners along and talk about the importance of shared responsibility, and that is a necessary part of this process and the conversation, and for us to be able to move forward in this space. And so I really appreciate my colleagues bringing this forward, and I look forward to supporting this order today. Clerk Hart, I don't believe I moved the motion. I did catch that, so I can ask for the motion to be moved and then call the vote. So with that said, is there a motion and a second to approve order number 2024-10?
So moved.
Second.
Great. Clerk Hart, please call the roll for the vote, and commissioners, please say aye or nay when your names are called.
Thank you. Beginning with Commissioner Hasegawa.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Calkins.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Fellman.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Cho.
Aye.
Thank you. And Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you. 5 ayes, 0 nays for this item.
Great. The motion passes. Thank you all so much. All right, moving us along in the agenda. There is actually no staff presentations today or staff report outs scheduled, so this actually concludes our business agenda for the day. With that said, are there any closing comments at this time or motions related to committee referrals from my colleagues? Commissioner Hasegawa.
Yes, I just wanted to acknowledge that Latino Heritage Month begins Thursday, September 15th, and this year's theme is Unifying Our Communities. Latinos Unidos will be participating in the Fiestas Patrias in South Park community this Saturday from 10 to 1, so if anybody's interested in joining, please do.
Wonderful. Thank you for that announcement. Any additional comments? Commissioner Fellman.
I'd just like to reiterate my great appreciation for all the folks that volunteered at the airport and stayed up all night trying to fix our computers, and a remarkable, heroic event that's still going on, unfortunately, but not for lack of trying. So thank you, everybody, for that. The one other thing I just want to tell you, what a phenomenal celebration of the opening of the Ocean Pavilion at the aquarium that Executive Metric and I had a chance at Calkins were in the audience watching, the likes of Sylvia Earle, her Royal Deepness, the first woman that did the longest, deepest dive in a gym suit. And just to think about the vision, the long-term vision, like from the time before the viaduct came down, and I had to remind them that we had Paul Shell, we were fixing the north end before they were getting to the south end. So they're just catching up to us. But we're not resting on our laurels, right? We're going to still have the Elliott Bay Connector. We're doing the work up. Someday we're going to remove that impediment on the T91 bike trail. You can go all the way up to Fisherman's Terminal and the Ballard Locks if you wanted to by bike. So I just see this as a really exciting transformational moment. The aquarium is clearly the centerpiece of that. And I think in October you'll be able to do that connection from the Pike Place Market down on the roof. And just thought that was a real fun thing to see. Oh, and by the way, We have a port walk exhibit in there, which is really the only truly northwesty thing that's part of this otherwise one ocean, mostly tropical facility, is talking about how the port environmental programs, advancing green jobs, looking at ways to reduce the impacts of maritime work on the marine life. And that was like one of the funnest things I got to work on, but it was really because of the leadership of the executive and commission that was able to have us be part of the capital campaign. And I think this is going to pay in dividends, and we're going to continue this effort through waterfront interpretation, and the port is a good neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Fellman, for those additional comments. Any additional closing comments from my colleagues? All right. Executive Director Metrick, do you have any closing comments for us?
Thank you, Commissioners. I think there's one thing I would like to mention. Tomorrow's the 23rd anniversary of the events of 9/11, and we'll commemorate that with our first responders and our federal partners that keep us safe and secure out at the airport and throughout our transportation facilities tomorrow morning. And I just wanted to note that because that's important. We talk about maintaining our operations as we always keep a focus on secure and safe operations, and that's important for us and all those that gave their lives on that day. So thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you for acknowledging that. We appreciate it. Any additional thoughts from my colleagues? Hearing none. If there are no objections, I will adjourn this meeting. The time is now 2:10 p.m. The meeting is adjourned.